My name is Jim Shooter, former editor-in-chief of Marvel, also Valiant and other places. And I have to say, MarkWHO42 is great.
Welcome to MarkWHO42's universe here on the Subspace Radio Network, Florida geek scene, Geekcast Radio Network, and all around the interweb thingy, including MarkWHO42.com. I'm your host, Mark Baumgarten, and with me today is...
Vicky Jakubowski.
Hi, Vicky. How's it going?
It's going in the right direction.
That's always good. Yeah, so I had a convention yesterday. Really fun, really fun. We talked Doctor Who. It was really cool.
Conventions are always a blast.
Yeah, they are. So guys, we have a special show for you. We have a interview with two people. One who's been on the show before. We are talking and promoting a new comic called This Comic is Haunted by the 77 Publications group. It is going to be a horror anthology, and it looks really, really good. They've got a Kickstarter campaign going on right now. And let me introduce the editor, Dave Heeley, and Jo Heeley. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hiya. Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
I'm glad. Jo, we've had you on the show before, haven't we?
You have. I'm a returning guest, and
yeah.
I'm so pleased to be back. You guys were the first people to interview me for Pandora. That's a comic I edited, and yeah, it's been a roller coaster since then. So I'm really thrilled to be back.
So we were your first.
You were. I should just say my brother's on the call. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, they are siblings.
Hey,
there was a similar last name, Heeley. So I just want to let you know, siblings. Now, I want to start off, Jo. I know your brother Dave is the editor of this endeavor, but what is your role?
I've actually written a story for This Comic is Haunted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also, I suppose, in a bit of role reversal because Dave's the older sibling. I'm sort of mentoring him through Kickstarter and press junkets and various other things. So with my hindsight from Pandora, I'm supporting him. Not that he needs much support. He's done
kind of like an associate editor.
No, that role's completely his. I'm more the lackey. I'm more the Jimmy Olsen to Clark Kent, I guess.
Just the smart woman behind the man.
There you go.
She's the Jiminy Cricket. She's my conscience. I know if I've gone too far with something when she sort of steps in and says, "No, Dave."
When your sister gives you that look, and you
absolutely.
just know you got to I have an older brother who, yes, we kind of joke. I just give him the look, and it's like, really, you want to go there? You know,
pretty much the same.
Yeah. Now, Dave, I want to ask you something. Tell us a little about this comic. What are we going to look forward to when we read this?
Right. Well, I mean, I'd like to think the great thing about this comic is that not only is it something new, because certainly there's not been what I would call a British comics horror anthology with a plan beyond issue 1 for 30 years properly. So I think we're definitely looking at building something here, but we're also harkening back to the past by sort of obviously playing on nostalgia, because there's so much love for the War and the EC comics of the past, and a very famous British horror comic anthology called Scream that didn't last very long.
Yes, I've heard of that one. Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're going for. We're sort of like trying to take something that's familiar to people, but take it into a new direction. With the horror comic, it's a 36-page horror anthology. So, you know, there's quite a bit of scope. We've got 5 full strips in there and a 1-page comedy shot each week, each issue by Lou Stringer, who's
I love Lou Stringer.
Exactly. When
Sergeant Shouty,
yeah,
Doctor Who, who'd have to mention. Yeah. Love it.
When Lou approached me and said, "Can I do a 1-page horror comedy strip every issue?" I was like, "Yep." Straight in. just produce it and I'll publish it.
I actually read an issue of his Barmy Comics with he's a great guy. He's funny.
Just going back, I mean, you know, with Lou going back 30 years, you know, to his Combat Collins stuff and stuff in Oink, which was like a really quite sort of like punk kids comic back in the 80s. Yeah, he's a wonderful guy as well, you know, real gentleman. And we're absolutely honoured to have him on board. But I think with this comic, we're also going. I'm a big fan of horror. Always been a big fan of horror. I'm not so much of a fan of the more extreme horror. So we're going for sort of like maybe a 15 certificate or sort of like NC-17 in America. Maybe we're not going for the extremes. I'm very much more a fan of a sort of creeping sense of dread than sort of like, you know, body parts flying everywhere. I don't mind that. It's got its place.
So we're
certainly wouldn't. So carry on.
Yeah, no. I was going to ask you. So we're saying like a mature audiences. Is it a mature audiences or is it like a?
I'd say teen really. You know,
okay.
Similar to the 77 where we do have boundaries.
Yes.
I don't want to push it too far because at the end of the day, I don't want to alienate anyone. And I think you can scare people just as good with a creaking door as someone being ripped apart. You know what I mean? So I mean, I come from a background of Hammer horror movies and things like that. So like I you know, you never went too far with that, but you could still have a wonderful sense of dread and horror with them as well. So I think that's what I've tried to go for here. And assembling the strips, obviously, with an anthology, it's always interesting because you're trying to balance the comic out. So you're trying to have different stories in. So with the 5 stories, we've got various things in there, such as ghosts, and we've also got some a little bit of folk horror and magic as well. You know, as well as a more traditional zombie story, which
zombies.
So we've got, well, you
gotta have one.
You have to.
You can't have one, and if you're missing it these days, then you're just missing it.
Yeah, we have gone slightly different. This story takes place in Scotland back in the Bronze Age, so it's slightly different. So, but that's written by Bambos Giorgio, who's a fantastic writer, and drawn by Gary Burley, who was in Pandora and has been in the 77 as well. So, yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Cool.
Well, I in reading up on you, Dave, I discovered that we have definitely some cross paths here. I saw that you enjoyed the movie They Live. It's one of your favorites.
It is my favorite.
One of the best, worst movies ever.
Absolutely. We're going to choose some bubble gum.
It's got everything you could ever want. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
I remember watching that one in the movie theaters and going, I think I like this. I probably shouldn't, but I'm gonna have to watch this again and now figure that and now it's kind of one of those cult classics that you just have to love because it is so bad. It is so good. Absolutely. Not to mention you love John Carpenter and Sam Raimi's Evil Dead series. So if this comic book anthology is going to be anything like that, you are taking my childhood and you are just putting it on the page, and I have to thank you for that.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean that is pretty much it. I mean, I was brought up like in terms of TV, the closest you get to horror really was sort of like your Hammer horrors. But I remember when I was a teenager, we had a video shop video store around the corner that would allow me to rent like Evil Dead 2 and Day of the Dead and stuff like that. When I was a little bit young for it, not massively young for it, I must admit, and unfortunately, I used to stick them on with Jo there as well, so I probably damaged her brain quite a lot.
Were you old enough for Video Nasties?
Oh yeah, my brother and I did that.
I wasn't old enough for Video Nasties, but I certainly watched them because I used to hang around with a bunch of kids, and it was a bit like like Stranger Things, but except we just used to watch Video Nasties as opposed to fighting them. And yeah, I remember watching stuff like The Exorcist at about the age of 10.
Yeah.
Just being
Yeah.
horrified.
I was old
Right.
enough for video nasties.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just about. And then when I was 18, I started working in a video store myself for a long time, which was fantastic. So it was just literally just watching films all day long. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
So yeah, so all these films that I really liked as a kid, it was just then we'd have a room in the back, and when it was quiet, I'd just be putting on my films a day that you couldn't obviously put a horror film on out the front. So
No.
I'd be just I'd sit in there for watching, you know, stuff like They Live or The Thing, you know, for hours on end. It'd be great.
Yeah.
I read that about you, that you worked at an independent video store, and it reminded me when I was in college and when I first got married. I was living in Mililani, Hawaii, and our best friend Kendrick worked in an independent video store, and it was like, oh, what weird, strange thing can you bring to movie night this week? You know, and it was just some of the strange things that he would find in the back corners, and it would have like Korean subtitles because they weren't released in the US yet. And, you know, it was just so much fun. It's so wildly inappropriate.
That was the great thing, because I used to get obviously free rentals, but it would all depend on what was taken out that day. So quite often, like, you know, I'd be left with some really obscure stuff that was never ever going to rent, and I'd find some real classics doing that. But yeah, there's also some very strange things going on there.
But I think as well with us two, our mum was the one who used to make us watch really, really random stuff, like the Chinese vampire movies.
Oh,
she just in the UK on BBC Two on a Friday or Saturday night, I can't remember which, you would occasionally have Alex Cox, who's most famous for Repo Man. And he would introduce certain movies, and Mum would set the VHS, you know, the recorder to film these movies, and we would watch some shocking stuff. And it was where we sort of were introduced to Kolchak, the Night Stalker.
Oh, yeah.
Weirdly enough, I've just purchased them through a major sort of retailer, online retailer. I've just purchased all the episodes, and we're doing a rewatch of those. So yeah.
Oh, sweet.
It was both Dave and my mum who sort of damaged my childhood.
Have you been watching, I think it's still on Talking Pictures, on Saturdays, Carolyn Monroe doing the horror films?
Yeah.
Oh, I love watching those. Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
It's such a find as well, because she's clearly enjoying herself.
Yeah.
And they are playing some pretty obscure movies as well. I mean, it was great. I mean, they've played it a couple of times now, but they've had the Dunwich Horror on, which I'm sure plays quite often in the States, but I can think of it only ever playing once in 30 years, maybe, in the UK on mainstream TV. And so it's been wonderful revisiting things like that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, I know we're doing a Kickstarter campaign. I know it ends this coming Sunday. Tell us about the Kickstarter campaign, why you're doing it, and where they can find it, what they have to do this.
Okay. Well, the reason we're doing it is because the 77 Publications has just found the Kickstarter route so useful for us. And obviously, the more Kickstarters that do, you're able to contact the people who've been part of previous Kickstarters. So that helps you with your promotion as well. And because we've got a track record now of delivering as well, because obviously I've had Kickstarters in the past and then been waiting 2-3 years down the line, but we pride ourselves on literally getting the product out the door as soon as the Kickstarter ends, because the product's always ready to print when it's finished. Whereas, like, you know, we're not waiting for art. I mean, I've got a deadline for all the art coming on next August the 20th. So literally the files have just got to be set in, and the 22nd of August we're printing, and then hopefully it'll be with people within a week or so after it's been printed. But so that's been going really well. We've still got like some high profile rewards on there, such as like individual art pages of Ian Stockfuss, who's an absolutely incredible artist that's doing The Lodger with Jo. He's done Extinction 2040 and The 77. Wonderful person. And yeah, so it's doing really well. And I think what's heartening as well is because obviously it's issue 1, so you never know what you're going to get. I always thought we were going to hit target.
Right.
But we've smashed the target, and obviously there's 7 days to go. It should do even more. And with Kickstarter, obviously, what we pride ourselves on as directors and any of the directors who write, we don't take a penny of it ourselves. We we forego our payments so that the other creators have a better split amongst themselves. So obviously, the more money we take, the better the split for them. And obviously, with it doing so well, it's been fantastic. You can find us on Kickstarter. You just type in "This Comic Is Haunted," it'll take you straight to it. We're a official project we love by Kickstarter as well. So I think that flags us up a bit more as well. And the basic standard price is £6.95, £6.95. But I think with Kickstarter, you can't have you can only have round figures, so it's £7. And then postage on top of that. But I mean, for the American audience, because obviously I know that sort of postage can be quite expensive. We do a digital file, and because we've reached over 5,000, there is quite a nice stretch reward. Because look, I'm in a fortunate position of working with the 77 for so long, since literally day one, with Ben and Steve. I've got quite a few contacts, and a lot of people have been really kind and done a lot of original artwork for me. And so we're going to bundle everything that's been sent through into extra PDF for people. So every single Kickstarter backer will receive that. So that's going to be about 30 pages of original artwork as well. So I think it's quite a good package. And given the standard of the stuff that's in there, I think it's definitely value for money, especially in today's, the way things are today. I know that people don't have a lot of money, but I think it's nice now and again to splash out on something that's going to provide quite a bit of entertainment.
Yeah. I love Kickstarter. I always contribute like on the first day, so I was able to do that. I just love everything the 77 Publications puts out. Everything. I mean, 77, Pandora, Blazer. I've got everything.
I think we've been really fortunate. I mean, myself, Ben and Steve, we literally started it from running the 2000 AD, 1977 to 2000 AD fan group. We wanted to make a 2000 AD fanzine. We were told that we couldn't do that because of IP, which is fine,
intellectual
so we were then in a
properties,
situation where, right, what do we do now? And then it was like, well, let's do our own comic. And we got really lucky in that we knew quite a few through the group. We knew quite a few of artists and writers anyway who'd worked for 2000 AD. Quite a few of them offered help on the first issue. And we just seemed to have discovered a load of new talent that just seemed to have been bubbling under the surface for decades. I mean, there's people who literally have not picked up a pen for 25 years because they never made it first time round. And then they've sent in something, and I'm the submissive and said, so I'm there going, this is brilliant. Why aren't you in 2000 AD? And they're like, oh, no, we're no good. And we're like, no, you are good. And sometimes it takes a bit of coaxing, and sometimes they're literally the finished article straight away. So we have been really lucky. And I think with Steve McManus helping us with Blaze.
Oh my God, we had him on the show. He's a great guy.
The wealth of experience. It's wonderful. I mean, it's amazing. I'm sure Joe will agree. Where you get to a convention and you're sitting down with, towards it's the equivalent of Lennon and McCartney. And they're just like, oh, all right, Dave, how are you? And I'm going, no, we have real imposter syndrome. They're like, no, it's just a job. And that'll give you so much help and insight to the business. And I think that's really helped the 77 out as we've gone along. I'm sure Joe would agree.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a real privilege, and I never thought I would end up doing this. It's still a pinch me moment. And I totally agree with the imposter syndrome, but I think with the back catalogue and the work that we're putting out, hopefully that will subside. I think we've certainly earned our position. So
you definitely have. I have to say that, so Mark Mark turned me on to you guys, and I was just like, my God, this is just awesome. And it just, everything in it is extremely high quality. There is amazing art. There's amazing stories. I want to know more. I want to get another issue. When is it coming out? I mean, you've just totally floored me. And I just have to say, the quality is just so good. You know, I've known other people who've done their own comics, their own fanzines and things, and they've been good. But you know, this started off as your love of 2000 AD, and you took it, and in my humble opinion, you guys just ran with it. You are the new. You are what. You just are heads and tails above anything I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I just really, love it really when I get the packages. My husband goes, "Hey, there's a package from England." I'm like, "Yes."
I think the main thing for us is that we actually set out to make a publishing house as opposed to a fanzine. We wanted to do as much as we possibly could. We didn't want to do something that would not be seen in 2 years' time. We did actually have a plan for it. We got lucky. You know, there's no denying. We really got lucky. You know, it was literally lightning in a bottle, and we were very fortunate for that. And I think now we're in a position of, well, what comics can we do next? But when are we going to fit them in? Because we all work in real life as well, and we literally at the case of we got.
Well, what may take me an hour or less to go through and absorb and enjoy takes you guys weeks and months and years to develop, from the artwork to the stories to the compiling it to the printing and everything that's involved with it. It's such a shame that it takes so long, but your quality is so good, so I can wait. No,
it's totally worth it to hear that. Thank you.
Where can people find back issues of the other comics that you guys put out? Because again, I love them all, and I want our fans and our listeners to find them, and so they can read them.
Yeah, we have our own online store, which is the77comic.net. Just basically Google that, and you'll go straight to us. And we always have some great deals on there anyway, because obviously because we've already funded ourselves via the Kickstarter.
Right.
So we tend to do a lot of deals on bundles and that stuff for people who want to buy all the comics together and so on. I mean, for example, issue 1, we've had to do a reissue of issue 1, and now we're having to do a second reprint of that now because that's sold out, which that's
that
incredible.
So awesome.
We just didn't expect that at all. I mean, it was one thing to have to reprint it.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, we'll reprint it, and we only reprinted it about 3 months ago.
Yes.
And now we wish we'd printed more because it costs an absolute fortune to just keep
that is a wonderful problem to have. That is absolutely awesome. Yeah. And I think issue 2 is due a reprint soon, and issue 3. Yeah, and issue 3, we're going to be in the same situation within the next few months as well.
Are the reprints of issue 2 and so on going to be like the reprint of issue 1, where it's not every story and there's a new story?
Yeah, absolutely. Issue 3 might be similar, because obviously the situation we've got is because nearly everything is creator owned.
Right.
Some people have chose they want to sort of do their own thing with it afterwards. So we only had permission to reprint it the once, which is we printed the once, should I say?
Right.
Which is absolutely great. That was the whole point behind it, that it was creator owned, so that people could hopefully make success for themselves elsewhere. So it should. The majority of the stuff, certainly the big stories such as the Cell, the 77, the main stories, sort of Joe's strip, Red by Night, is it? I always get it the wrong way around. Always, but Joe does as well, so that's okay. So yeah, the main and Trackless Depths, they'll certainly all be in there. So it's going to be pretty much the same. Sergeant Shouty will be reprinted as well.
What was the new story in issue 1 to reprint? I forgot what it was.
That was a story by Mahmoud, our friend from Nigeria, who I think it was called Arrival or something like that. A sci-fi story. It was ever so interesting. Yeah. So we are trying to put something new in there, so that obviously, if people want to buy it again, they're not going to just be buying exactly the same.
Right.
Thing.
Yeah.
You made me have to buy a reprint. I have to buy reprints to get the new stories.
Yeah, it's not a cynical ploy. But if it works, right.
You're listening to MarkWHO42's Universe. We're talking all about the new horror comic, This Comic is Haunted. We've got the editor, Dave Heeley, and his conscience, Jo Heeley, on the show. I'm Mark Baumgarten. Vicky Jakubowski is with me. We're here on Subspace Radio Network. We'll be right back after this.
We'll be back with more of MarkWHO42's Universe.
Ah, brave new world that has such putzes in it.
The Pull Bag is GCRN's comic book review and discussion-based podcast. Join me, your host, TFG and Mike, and the rest of the GCRN crew as we make our way through the comics we are reading. Inside the Pull Bag, you'll also find back-issue classics and origins episodes of how we got into comic reading. You can find the Pull Bag every Wednesday on iTunes and on www.ecastradio.com. Make your great escape into comics and jump into the Pull Bag today.
Oh yes, but think of the fun.
You are listening to MarkWHO42's Universe.
Welcome back to more of MarkWHO42's Universe here on Subspace Radio Network, Florida Geek Scene, Geekcast Radio Network, everywhere around the Whoniverse. Oh, the Whoniverse, we're in a universe now. And on MarkWHO42.com. I'm your host, Mark Baumgarten. With me are Vicky Jakubowski. We're talking This Comic is Haunted with editor Dave Heeley and sibling Jo Heeley of The77 Publications. Hey, guys.
Hiya.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you here.
It's absolutely our pleasure. This is lovely. Thank you.
Good. I wanted to start this segment. Well, first of all, let me mention there's a Kickstarter campaign for this, and you can go to Kickstarter to look for This Comic is Haunted. The campaign ends this Sunday?
That's right.
21st.
Yes,
21st. Yeah. What time?
I think it's 7 p.m. UK time. So
yeah. So that would be on the eastern coast of the United States at 2 p.m., 11 a.m. On the Pacific coast, and you'll have to find it if you're somewhere else in the world, because I know you're listening, so you'll have to do the math yourselves. I wanted to start off this segment by talking about a comic that's coming out. There's a comic called The Shift. I'm not sure. Are they a publication company or is it just a comic?
It's a comic. It's quite a big deal because they have quite a big distribution deal in W.H. Smith's, which is our main chain in the UK. It's pretty much got the monopoly of sort of like news agents, as it were. So yeah, they're doing really well. But I think several times a year they do a sort of a special presents where they showcase other titles. And the 77's going to be the latest one to be coming out.
Woohoo! Yeah, The Shift presents the 77 issue 1. What kind of stuff are going to be in it? Is it going to be reprints? Is it going to be new stuff? What exactly is it?
As far as I'm aware, because obviously Ben and Steve are like editing this, it is going to be mainly reprints. I believe there may be one new strip in there, but I'm not entirely sure on that. But I know you've got a fair chunk of Division 77 in there, The Cell, and various other strips, and V as well, obviously. So it's it's with the distribution in the UK, it's very hard to get into what's W.H. Smith's, which is our big chain. And this will be a real big opportunity for us. We're hoping it will reach a lot of people and obviously sort of feedback to when we're doing Kickstarters and so on, and our own shop as well, which is online as well. So it should be really interesting to see how it goes.
Okay, I gotta give a toot our own horn. There might be an ad in there that's interesting.
I believe so, yeah.
There might be a very interesting ad in there.
Well, I mean, in terms of comics numbers as well that are printed, you're looking at close to like 2000 AD level numbers, which is comparatively huge to what we normally print. So you're looking at, so it's going to get seen by a lot of people, and I believe the specials are kept on the shelf for quite some time as well.
Yeah,
sort of like weeks and months. So we'll be out there for some time, which is great. I'm really
and the books have more world distribution. They go. Because I think I've seen The Shift in comic shops over here.
Yeah, I'd assume so. Yeah, I mean, the shift to like pretty big business in the UK. So yeah, so we'll be getting more and more distribution there as well, which is wonderful as well. So yeah, it's interesting times. It certainly feels like a next step up for us.
Yeah. That's a huge step up for you guys. That's so awesome. I just, it kind of blows your mind when you think about Kickstarters. I mean, in this country, when you think about Kickstarters, it's usually these small little projects, and it's worked out beautifully for the 77 to kind of build the fan base and get it out there. And so much of what you do now is via, well, what we used to call mail order, and and electronic, that this takes you to a whole new plane, more of like when we were growing up and you'd go to the comic book store and you'd buy your comic books, and you know, there wasn't an opportunity when I was a kid to order them or anything like that. But I've loved it because this now, it just kind of blows my mind the way that things have changed so much in our lifetimes. And now you guys have created this magical online presence, and now you're coming in real life, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that was the whole ethos of the 77. We started off with having a community, which was, we were really lucky having the 1977 2000 AD group. And that enabled us to have literally hundreds of people who we were friendly with, who could trust us when we says, oh yeah, we're going to bring out a comic. It wasn't just like, oh yeah. They were on board with us, but they were pushing us as well. They were like, when's it coming out? What's going to go on? Who's going to be in it? And I think that helped a lot. And with the W.H. Smith distribution, especially. I mean, although we do have the 77 in Forbidden Planet, which is great, and you know, and comic stores have it, you know, across the country. That is amazing. But in terms of actual footfall of people, you're looking at millions of people shopping W.H. Smith's, and the ultimate goal obviously would be to take us away from Kickstarter if that was available to, and actually have us in W.H. Smith all the time. It's very difficult to do that because there's a huge financial commitment to getting it like that, but it's a wonderful first step, and I think you know, it shows that we, if nothing else, we're committed to going forward and, you know, sort of branching out and keep bringing, like we're bringing new comics out. You know, we got 4 different titles now.
Wow.
We were only talking today that someone wants to produce a war comic, like, you know,
like Battle.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've wanted to do something like that for ages because I've got so many war stories because I grew up with that. But it's just finding time, because obviously with Kickstarters, you can't start a new Kickstarter until you finish fulfilling the last one. So you're always in a position where you're sort of chasing yourself. You've got to get the one done to bring out another one, and to bring out, and so you end up with a schedule where you can only do so much in a year's span, unless you end up with the 77 going yearly, and we don't want that. So so that might be something that comes one day. It's certainly being talked about, but once again, with so much going on. I mean, I know Haunted's going to be biannual, and hopefully, I mean, Joel attests this. We're hoping to sort of like run Pandora and Haunted sort of like back to back, so that, you know, you'll get a Pandora, then get a Haunted. Whereas, and then on the other side of the Kickstarter, we'll get the 77 and Blazer running. So it's just to keep things moving, and then throw in an annual now and again. So there's plans for another annual.
Easy peasy. It's fine.
It's quite a bit. And somewhere in there, I'll try and sort of like do my own job as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then you've got your day job, and
and families and stuff like that. It's just like, whoa! It's like, it's incredible. It is incredibly rewarding. I mean, I'm sure you get it yourself with doing podcasts. You do it for the love. You know, it can eat up time, but it's fantastic to sort of meet people and so on. So I could never ever complain about this, but a little bit more sleep would be nice.
Yeah. Dave, what do we have in store for this first issue? Writer, artist, team, stories. What are we looking at?
Okay. Well, we've got 2 fantastic covers. We've got a cover by Ian Stopforth, who's working with Jo on The Lodger, and that's just a beautiful image of the actual fictional editor, because I'm a firm believer that all horror anthologies should have a fictional editor, going back to sort of like, you know, the Crypt Keeper and so on. And
absolutely.
Definitely.
So we've got the Grey Phantom, who's officially the editor. I'm just helping him out. And
I love it.
we've got an amazing cover by Alex Ronald, who's just pretty much, for me, 2000 AD's best cover artist. Just an absolute phenomenal artist.
I love that you bring in professionals from 2000 AD and stuff. It totally works with the theme of the 77.
But the wonderful thing about it is that we've got to the stage now where they'll actually come to us and go, "Can I have a cover?" Because they want to get involved, which is just like, wow, you know, I mean, that's how this came along, you know. It's like, do you want me to do a cover? And I'm like, yeah. So, you know, other people are on board.
Oh, here, twist my arm, twist my arm.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I was like, yeah. Well, originally there was going to be one cover for Haunted, and when I got in touch with Alex and we spoke, it was like, no, we're going to have a variant as well. So, but in terms of strips, we're leading off with Joe's strip, The Lodger, with Ian Stopford, beautiful painted art, absolutely fantastic. And then we've got our only black and white strip, because I'm a firm lover of black and white comics as well. So we've got a lovely black and white strip called The Drummer from Hell, and that's written by the legendary Alan Hebden, who wrote so many 2000 AD strips. He wrote Starnav for Pandora, wrote for loads of Battle, Commando comics. He's been around a long time, an incredibly respected person. And that's been illustrated by Lee Milmore, who won this year's 2000 AD Art Stars, or last year's 2000 AD Art Stars competition in Thought Bubble. So he's been in 2000 AD now as well. Yeah. And his artwork is just unbelievable. I was really lucky with him because it's a sort of sideways move, but I managed to pinch him for a story in Blazer 3 that I've got, which is a horror story as well. Because Steve McManus wanted to sort of bring in a horror story, so I've got a little Christopher Lee type meets Dracula in real life.
Nice.
Speaking of that, when is Blazer 3 coming out? Do you know?
That's scheduled to go to Kickstarter after this comic is Haunted ends, so within about 3 weeks, I think.
Wow!
Yeah, which is once again what I told you about the turnaround. Now,
yeah.
It's like, you know, one finishes, we've got to get started on that. So, but that strip's all finished. That's great.
Right.
So we've also got Hill of the Dead, which is the story I talked about earlier, which is zombies in ancient Scotland. And that's by Bambus Giorgio and drawn by Gary Burley. We've also got something I've wrote, which is The Bones of Winter, which is a folk horror come magic story. It's probably the least horror story of the lot, but it's something I've been wanting to get in a horror comic for ages, and I think that'll be quite interesting. That's beautifully drawn by Mark Maron, who's come from animation into comics, so this is only his second published comic work. He worked with Jo on The Annual, and he's wonderful. And we've got so much stuff. We've also got a new writer, Dr. Catherine Wilde. She's wrote a story called Tina's Party. That's probably our most horrific story, and that's fully painted. That's fully painted by the art editor, who's been absolutely fantastic.
Andrew Richmond.
Wonderful guy. I mean, you know, I'm an incredibly laissez-faire editor. He's like, I've literally said to Andy, can you do this? He's like, yeah. I'm just like, yeah, go for it. And he'll say, do you like that? And I'll go, yeah. It's brilliant. So yeah, he's been wonderful, and this strip's really good. And then we've also got Lou Stringer doing Short Sharp Shocks, which is it's a real fun one-page tale set partly in a convention. Is all I can say. There's
that works for me.
Plenty of cartoon blood and guts. So
nice.
Yeah, I think that'll be quite fun.
Jo, tell us a little about your story that's going to be in this, The Lodger.
Oh, well, I was just before I joined the call, I was just finishing up the second part to it. So it's fresh in my mind. It's take on the stories that I read as a child and the things that you would sometimes see on news reports, and you've probably heard about it. It's one of the most famous sort of modern day hauntings, but the Enfield poltergeist. So I was really always fascinated by that because it was such a mundane setting for a haunting that absolutely terrified me as a child. So you had a family living in a council house very similar to what I was living in, being supposedly terrorized by a poltergeist. So riffing on that, I decided to, in my wisdom, sort of set a haunting in another urban sort of home, but also, like I say, just gently sort of riffing on the main characters that were part of this Enfield poltergeist. As it sort of transpires, the story is something that's quite common all across the world. How the ghost appears in the home, but recently there have been similar situations in our press in the UK where people are not necessarily found for some time. So I'm trying to be really sort of like sensitive to the situation, but also bring in this these characters that I hope that I can develop and may reappear in this comic as haunted. So it will be a step off story, or rather a stepping point story for the characters that you will actually see in the second issue. And
butting in as an editor, because Jo doesn't get any slack from me whatsoever. She didn't get in. She didn't get in because she's my sister. If I thought it was crap, it would be cut because she knows that. That's why she knows it's great, because I've got it in there. But what I will say is, originally Jo had intended to be a 2-part sort of single contained story, and how Jo had originally done it, it would have probably left it where we wouldn't need to continue it further. But I loved it that much. I said to Jo, now I want him back, the lead character. So it's certainly going to return in a few issues' time, isn't it, Jo? Because it is absolutely fantastic.
Sweet.
And I think one of the things that Jo was saying about the mundanity of some of these hauntings, I think going back to sort of like, I always remember during the Nuremberg trials where they talked about the banality of evil. I think that's really fascinating, where you can have something that's so normal yet be so horrible. And I think Jo certainly achieved that, and what she's got planned for part 2 is just wonderful. So I'm really
I can't wait.
being scared by that. And the art is just unbelievable. I mean, it's beautifully painted as it is, but it's done in such a wash that it's just so, I wouldn't say depressing, but it's haunting. And you're reading it, and
nice.
You're like, oh my God. It's quite a claustrophobic story, isn't it, Jo? And I think it's brilliant.
Yes. Well, it's set in a tower block, which
that's always good.
Even though you might have views out of the window, you are in quite an enclosed space. You are literally in a box, and it's sort of, like I say, I'm trying to be as sensitive as I can to those issues that, you know, the haunting sort of arises from. But it was something that I wrote having read so many and also experienced so many people telling me things about council housing, sort of social housing, that quite often I've took calls in the past from people who believe their home is haunted, and it was just something that I had to write about.
Right.
So like I say, it's just making sure it's it's put across in a sensitive manner.
Okay. I know that next Sunday, the 21st, big day because the Kickstarter campaign ends, but what is it about September 10th?
Well, yes, we've got quite an interesting day on September the 10th. That's when we're officially launching the comic, in terms of being able to sell it physically. We're hoping, there's no reason why all the backers shouldn't have it before September the 10th. On September the 10th is the Birmingham ICE convention, which is a massive comic convention. That's at Edgbaston Cricket Ground in Birmingham, and that's run by Shane Chebsey, who's also is the publisher of Scratch Comics, and he's been in the industry for many years. And we've got a table there, and I will be dressing in cosplay as the Grey Phantom. I have got a monk's outfit.
Nice.
So so we're going to be selling the comic there. We're going to have a few of the creators down signing stuff as well. So Ben's going to be there helping me, but we've got Andy Richmond popping up for the day, I believe, and Dr. Catherine Wild's going to be there, and I'm hoping Joe might even be able to pop up. So it's going to be a fun day, and it's quite a big convention. They've got some real good stars from America as well. So I'm really looking forward to it and seeing if I can get some signatures in my monk's outfit.
Wow, that sounds cool. Will you guys be doing any panels, or is it just the table?
Just the table this year, yeah. I think we did so much stuff at Lawless. It'll be quite nice just to have a normal day of a convention and sell stuff instead of come away not being able to talk. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh yeah.
Tell us a little about Lawless, because I haven't heard about. I mean, I knew about it, and we haven't talked about it yet. What went on at Lawless? How was that?
It was wonderful. I mean, Joe was there as well. I mean, all the directors were there for the entire 2 days, and it was just chaos, because it's obviously there's so many stars there, and then you're getting so many hundreds of people footfall, and talking to the fans who've been buying the comics since issue 1. I mean, we've got a wonderful fan, Norman, who travelled down from the far north of Scotland. Sort of like, he'd come to Thought Bubble last year in November and got all his comics signed, and then came down all the way to Bristol, which is hundreds of miles.
Hopefully Norman is listening. Hi, Norman. Hi, Norman.
Lovely guy.
Hi, Norman.
He brought his son down, and the wonderful thing about it was we did lots. There were lots of panels done and so on, and we had great fun. But it was wonderful to be able to stay overnight and actually sit in the bar afterwards and talk to the fans and people who like the comics, and just talk as in the same way that I talk to people like Steve McManus. I suppose it's like I'm there talking about comics and what that inspires me, and what I've loved of the output he's done. And then there were people asking me about what Joe's done and what Ben's done, and it's really nice, and it sort of takes away that barrier of just selling stuff. I mean, we're not in it to make money anyway, but it's wonderful to just actually, not being on a podcast or being interviewed. It's just wonderful to actually talk about it without trying to sort of make any money out of it, because we're talking about the love of it, and it was wonderful, Lawless. Me and Joe, it was great that I got to spend the weekend with Joe as well, because we live opposite ends of the country as well these days. So yeah, it was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've never known anything like it, and I just go back to the point when I mentioned about being interviewed by you guys as being my first ever sort of press interview. That's certainly where I did a panel which was recorded. That certainly helped so much, because I'm not one usually for public speaking. So
you do a great job here. You're great at
you're
public
fabulous
speaking.
as far as I'm
fabulous.
it was such an amazing thing to be sort of peer reviewed as well. So we were getting other creators coming along and seeing our work and being like, I bought that, and it's like, I know Dave experienced this at Thought Bubble, which is the UK's biggest convention, I think, with Mike Perkins.
Yeah, I'd worked on a strip with Mike Perkins 30 years ago, just a little thing, and then he'd gone away to massive success, and I'd gone away to working in a day job and given up writing for many years. And he was at the table. I didn't recognise him because he was wearing a mask, unfortunately. So he was at the table looking at Blazer, and I was talking to him as if I would a customer, I was explaining what he was. And he goes, no, Dave, I know exactly what it is. And I was like, all right, Mike, in a while. And he's going, I bought all the comics, I love it, it's brilliant. So I was like, oh wow, that's a bit weird. But yeah, it's fantastic. And of course, something like Lawless is fantastic for networking. I mean, I lined up loads of people for future issues.
Yeah.
This comic is haunted, and also the 77, and we discovered there's 2 guys. I discovered one James Fletcher is going to be a big part of this comic.
Oh,
He's
he's awesome.
because his artwork's very. There's a certain Bernie Wrightson style to his art. He's that good. And another guy as well, Jack from Ireland, who will be fitting in before long as well. So it was worth the entire weekend just to meet a couple of people who could then eventually break into the comic. I thought that was brilliant. Certainly the highlight for me, that was.
Okay. Before we go for Subspace Radio, because we're going to have to leave them soon, tell us a little more, once again, Kickstarter, where they can find it, what they can get, what it is.
Okay, yeah, basically, you just go onto Kickstarter, type in "This Comic is Haunted," and it'll come up with a Kickstarter project we love. You can buy either a digital copy if you're worried about the postage costs, or you can buy a regular issue. We've got two various issues. We've got 2 issues: regular issue, variant issue. We also sell packs where you can buy both at once. We've also got lots of access to previous comics we produced, such as the 77, Blazer, and so on. We've also got some high-profile rewards left. I know there's an Ian Stockforth original art page. I mean, I own one of his art pages. I own the cover, and up close, it's just incredible. And we've got loads of other things in there. We've got loads of lovely things, and we've got some brilliant stretch goals. And I think we're on about £5,600 at the moment. And if we get 6,000 by next week, then I'll announce another stretch goal for that as well. So there'll be some more freebies coming out for people as well. So because we believe in value for money. At the end of the day, it's we're not out to scale people. We want to give people the best product we can at the cheapest price we can afford to print it. So I think people will be pleased with it. I certainly am anyway. I'm watching the artwork come in now, and we've already, myself and Andy, the art editor, we've already got us almost dummy issue made up online already, and I'm looking at it going, oh wow, this is incredible. It's certainly my highlight. I mean, it's been wonderful getting published in various things over the years, but this for me is, this is my baby. I'm all about horror, and I've been planning this for about 18 months.
I had one more question, but we actually answered it. I was going to ask you, why are you and Grey Phantom never seen in the same room together? But I think you answered that.
Yeah, is why, I'm afraid. Yeah, or is it? Or is it? Maybe it's just the darker side of me.
That's too much.
I did for the Kickstarter launch. I got my eldest daughter to do a full set of makeup on my face. I won't be doing that again because it took about 2 hours to get off.
Yes,
it was the first time I'd had makeup on my face, and it was the last because I looked like a panda for about 2 days afterwards. I just had a little. Didn't matter what I did, I just couldn't get it off. So yeah, it wasn't the best. So
all right.
I'll go back to just looking as tired as I normally do.
Okay. Well, that's about all the time we have on Subspace Radio Network. We only have an hour. It's an hour show here, but we are going to continue. If you want to hear more of this conversation, more from Jo, because Jo's been really quiet, so we'll have more from Jo and more from Dave Heeley. If you go to the MarkWHO42's Universe podcast, we add the word "the" in podcast, and we are going to keep going with this conversation. You can find us at MarkWHO42.com, Florida Geek Scene, Geekcast Radio Network. You can find us on Audible. You can find us on iTunes. Everywhere that podcasts are played. So we're going to stick around, but for Subspace Radio, bye. Guys, I hope you can stay for this next segment.
Happily, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful.
All right. So please go to that podcast, or if you're already listening to us on the podcast, stick around. We'll be right back.
We'll be back with more of MarkWHO42's universe.
By the power of Grayskull, I command the jaw bridge. Open!
The Powers of Grayskull series will cover every episode of all 4 Masters of the Universe cartoons. Join Optimus Solo and myself, TF2 and Mike, as we tell tales of Eternia, discover the myths of Etheria, become masters in space, and finally masters of Grayskull. We'll have a commentary on the Secret of the Sword film and a few other special episodes. You can find this 125 episode long podcast in iTunes and on the web at geekcastradio.com. By the power and honor of Grayskull, we all have the power.
Yeah, I hope I didn't miss anything exciting.
You're still listening to us on the MarkWHO42's Universe podcast here on Florida Geek Scene, Geekcast Radio Network, all around the interweb thingy, and MarkWHO42.com. If you were listening to us on Subspace Radio, welcome back. Okay, we are talking about This Comic is Haunted from the 77 Publications. With us are Dave Heeley and Jo Heeley. Welcome back, guys.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Dave, I have a question for you, or not really a question. Well, I guess it is. Your comic book background. I know you've done a lot of work for the 77 and the UK, but I hear you also do work for Antarctic Press, which is in the US.
Yeah, well, the Antarctic Press is they're reprinting Division 77. Which is
wow.
absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I mean, Ben Dunn, who runs Antarctic Press, I mean, he's got a massive back catalogue, such as sort of Ninja High School and so on and so forth. And we luckily got put in touch with him by a mutual friend of mine, Steve Ross, and he basically wanted to reprint Division 77 in Planet Comics, which is an anthology in America. I mean, there's not many anthologies in America as it is. So we're reprinting that, and there may even be a chance in the future of actually putting some original content in there as well first. And I know I know. I think we're going to be getting Martian Law going there as well, and possibly
I love Martian Law.
Yeah. Well, Brendan's done an entire brand new cover for it, which is just absolutely fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, we're quite lucky. Yeah, the only problem we've got a body of work, but it's going to catch up eventually. You know what I mean? So because we're only on issue 8. But yeah, it's really exciting times. I mean, it's wonderful to be printed in America. I mean, in terms of before, I'd done some small press stuff back in the 90s, but you know, most of my work was prose. I used to write a lot of horror prose online, but with real life and work and families and that, I sort of like gave up on that. And then luckily, with meeting Ben and Steve, we managed to continue that and sort of bring it back. And then I was able to sort of develop writing prose into writing comics, which was a huge, really, really difficult, but rewarding as well. It's a very different process for me. So we continue with that, and it's looking good. It's looking good.
Well, I'm in awe of you guys. I can't draw, or I can write nonfiction, but fiction, I don't even know how you guys come up with these amazing ideas, and you turn this into this product that I absolutely love. So I'm completely in awe with both you and Jo. How do you kind of come up with your ideas? I mean, where does this magic and horror and everything in between come from?
Well, I mean, for myself, I work outdoors, so I have an awful lot of time to think. So, yeah, and it's much nicer to think about stories than it is to think about the mortgage. So I tend to sort of do that, and in terms of sort of preparing stuff, I tend to if I get a basic story, I'll run it through my head and imagine it as a film. So then I'll sort of break down that film into different parts. Then I'll write a synopsis, and then I'll try and remember what I was thinking when it was the film in my head and how I wanted it, and then break it down like that. I don't know how Jo works. I'm sure it's totally
weirdly enough, that's exactly how I do it. And I think having a really good imagination as well. Everybody's got imagination, but as a child, I was really creative. And I think, again, that's just all the exposure to pop culture, to books, to all this stuff coming into my brain and staying there. But yeah, and I can draw, and I guess I can write. I'm really proud of the.
Oh, I think you can write beautifully, darling.
But I'm really
I
proud
just
of.
love your. Oh yeah.
proud of this story for this comic as Haunted. But yeah, I'd certainly say that I have a series of images in my head that then I put down into panels as I'm writing. So I break it down into by page, by panel. Yeah, aside from that, it's I don't think there's any sort of like, I'm not tapping into anything, and not tapping into any sort of like, cosmic consciousness, but I think it is literally just having been a sponge. My brain was obviously a sponge as a child that had all these different things coming in, and I suppose it's a bit like a like a random word generator, or shaking a cup of dice, something,
Yeah.
snake eyes will come out, that kind of thing. But I sort of same with Dave, real life got in the way, so I spent from my late teens until even now, but I spent most of my adult life caring for family members.
Yeah.
And work as well, and my focus was on that, and I put my creative side to one side, and yeah, I'm just in a fortunate position now that I can actually get back and get onto these things. I've got an extremely supportive family, really supportive fiance. My brother's supportive sometimes, and I've got supportive and I've got a supportive team at the 77 who again took a chance on this crazy little story that I came up with for the 77. So yeah,
I like to think I'm a creative person, and I can be in many ways, but not necessarily in writing fiction or drawing. My stick figures are actually embarrassing. Luckily, my son got my mother's artistic ability. Thank God. But I so enjoy everything I've read in the 77 and Blazer and Pandora, and can't wait for this new one to come out. I'm just in awe of people who can create this magic. And I think that you guys are just fabulous, and do more and do more.
Thank you.
I'm just going to keep saying that, do more, because I have not had this much fun in a few decades. I still love my comic books, but I just am not into them as much anymore. And then I started reading these. Thank you, Mark. And
You're welcome.
I'm just like, it's like, oh, I kind of, you feel that, I don't know, you reach a certain point when you're in your fifth decade where you kind of go, oh yeah, my childhood. And
yep.
And I can't wait. I'm curious, how did you come up with the name of this particular comic book? I have a theory.
Okay, well, it's not that interesting actually. Originally, I wanted something to do with haunt or haunted. And then you look online at how many comics are actually called that. And you're like, okay, I can't call it that. And then it was like, all right, I'm going to call it Haunted. And then someone messaged me on Facebook and said, you do realise that the largest paranormal magazine that sold at WH Smith is called Haunted. Well, I can't call it that, because if I ever want it in WH Smith, I can't. So then I thought, well, if we have a tagline, this comic is haunted, and have the haunted really big, and then everyone just kept calling it this comic is haunted. So I just like, well, we'll have it like that.
Well,
then I found out there's about 4 other comics over the last 50 years that have been called this comic is haunted.
Yes,
I just
there was a short run magazine in the 50s called This Magazine is Haunted.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I was like, I wonder if there's a connection.
No, it genuinely, I had no idea. I literally, the day I announced the name of it online, Des Skin, who created Warrior and was pretty much Marvel UK back in the 70s.
Right.
showed me a mock-up cover for a comic he wanted to do, that Doctor Strange on, saying this comic is haunted. And I was like,
No.
and he certainly didn't accuse me of plagiarism, but I don't think he believed me when I said, no, I really had no idea. So, and by then, the title had changed so many times. I was like, oh, sorry, I'm staying with this comic is haunted now.
Well, at worst, it can be viewed as an homage to all the ones that came before. So
absolutely, yeah. But there's certainly only so many variations, I think, of that kind of thing. But I think it works, and I like it now, and it's staying definitely. Until
I think it works really well, and to me, it's like, oh, I must know more about this. Yeah. I don't know. There's something in the title that just makes you go, oh, it's not just haunted. This comic is haunted.
And
Ooh, what does that mean?
It works quite well for merchandise as well, because the T-shirts we're selling are this T-shirt is haunted in the same font as the comic. So I think we can have a bit of fun with that as well. So yeah, it's interesting times.
Well, you see that, and then you're going to sell pencils, and this pencil is haunted, and you're going to sell pen, and this pen is haunted. It goes for everything.
It's limitless.
So...
Yeah. This podcast is haunted.
Yes, this podcast is haunted.
I have another one for you.
Uh-oh.
This episode is called
MarkWHO42 is haunted. Yes, that is exactly what the title of this episode will be called.
Yeah. So we're part of your merchandising too. You can advertise us. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic.
I guess it's got to be part of the fun creative process of this, is whether you're creating a strip, an ongoing story, the books, whatever you're going to call these things. That must be really difficult sometimes, trying to make sure that you're either paying homage to somebody who came before, or that you're trying to stay as original as possible. And then someone says, oh yeah, I read that story back in 1972. And
yeah, absolutely. I was quite fortunate with Division 77 because that was literally dropped on me. We had a strip that got pulled at the last second because the person wasn't going to be ready. And I think I had 3 days to write it. And we had about 2 weeks for the guy to draw it, Sinclair. And so like Ben says, well, what's your title going to be? And I'll go, well, it's got to be something to do with 77. So yeah, let's just call it Division 77. And that was literally that. The rest of them I take a bit more time over. But yeah,
nothing like a deadline to loom over your head.
Oh yeah, it's great. Yeah. Well, yeah, this is the deadline I've got with the comic now, and I'm like, we've got a week, and then it goes to print in 9 days or whatever, and I'm like, oh, it's like, and even though I know it's all there, it's never going to. I know how Ben feels now because I've never had this stress before. I've not, and it's certainly a different kind of worry.
Gnashing of teeth and pulling of hair.
Well, that's the thing. You're not reliant on yourself with an anthology. You're reliant on sort of 20 different people coming together all at once. And when it works, it's fantastic. But if there's just one little piece that doesn't work, it sort of holds up everyone else. So yeah, thankfully, I think for this we're okay.
Yeah, Jo.
Yes,
Jo. I've been enjoying Red by Night, Black by Day.
Oh yes.
What do we have to look forward to in future installments?
Well, we will certainly be coming towards the end of this story arc, and we'll certainly be seeing Ola uncovering the mystery of the Lunar Society and their sort of experimentations on the Portal folk. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Rupert's take on that, because the artwork that he did for issue 8, the final page of that strip was just awesome. And I just give artists a few words, the way I see it. I just put a few words down and just let him sort of go to town on it, and he really did in this particular episode. It's just stunning. Yeah. It's a Birmingham that I sort of recognise and don't. I'm not saying it's a a sort of hellish hole, but yeah, he's really captured that fantasy element sort of in a real life setting as well, and that's what I really wanted, this alternate sort of history to the city that I was. I wouldn't say I was brought up in Birmingham. I was brought up a short distance outside of, but I certainly spent most of my Saturday mornings as a child following Dave round the city centre, going from one comic book shop to another. I swear he only took me along so I could carry his boxes. And I really do mean boxes. But
that was when you could buy a lot of comics for pocket money.
Yes,
those days ago.
But I'm just so thrilled with Rupert's take on this world that I could have drawn it myself. But I am so glad that he did it, because I wouldn't have had. He's certainly brought a lot to that story. A lot of the little, like the graffiti that you see on the walls of the canals,
right?
And he's certainly helped my story progression as well, because I read what he's drawn, and not read. I see what he's drawn, and the little like I say, the little graffiti or the little posters, and I'm like, oh, I can use that in the next one. So yeah, it's been a really good partnership.
You were just talking. You were just talking a little about story and story process, kind of. This is for both of you. What makes a good story? See, I'm throwing out all the hard. I'm throwing out all the hard questions here on MarkWHO42. What makes a good story?
For me, it's something I want to read. I know that's. I hope that doesn't come across as arrogant.
Well, I don't think you win the prize for that one. You didn't win the game show, but I'll take that answer.
But certainly, it's something that if I haven't seen it, it's like most things in life. If I can't find something in the shop, I'll make it myself.
Right.
Jewelry or clothes or what have you. If there's something out there that I want to read, well, do you know what? Let's go ahead and do this myself. So I think a good story is something that can capture people, sort of spur their imagination, just leave them wanting more. And certainly with world building, with stories, it's about you've got to have that certain criteria that people want to sort of invest their time into reading about this world, and or that they might see some similarities, or they might see something that they recognize or they're interested in.
Okay, Dave, what makes a good
story? I'm not like Joe. Joe's much more intellectual than me. I'm more. I'm all about the big hook. I want to get just one strong idea, and then it builds from there for me. I don't worry about whether it's been done before, because for myself, I think everything's been done before. Everything I've read, everything seems like a retread now. But if you can take it in an interesting direction, that's fantastic. But I tend to think of a concept first, quite often a title. I mean, such as Silver Jubilee, which I do with Andrew Sawyers for the 77.
Yeah.
My idea was I wanted to do a superhero story. I wanted it to be slightly different. My nephew's of Hindi descent, so they, the Indian population never gets represented in comics anyway, or very rarely, and certainly not superheroes. So I thought from there, and I thought, well, the 77 comics come about from 1977. So what happened in 1977? Well, for the UK, it was all about the Silver Jubilee.
Yes.
That was it. I mean, I was around then. I was a kid, and it was huge. I think it was the year before you were born, wasn't it, Joe? But I remember it vividly, and I was only
youngster Joe. Youngster.
She's just a little baby.
She's the youngest person on this show today.
Joe's always the youngest person.
I was 20 years old at that Jubilee. I'm an old man. I'm old.
Was it even
5 or 6? I still remember it well. So yeah, in terms of that, so Silver Jubilee, I thought, right, that's the title. And then we went from there, and everything else came from that. Division 77. Once again, that was literally written on the fly. It's just like, and yeah, it varies for me. Like with the Bones of Winter, which I've written for Haunted, that's going to be. If you've ever read Summer Magic for 2000 AD, my take on that was Luke Kirby. It was just what would have happened if he'd have grown up and never done magic. So it's a guy who's pushing 50, who's literally doesn't do magic anymore, but he's forced to do it because something happens where he's going to need it. And then as the story progresses, there's going to be more and more magic involved in it. I thought, well, that'll show sort of a bit of aging in that. But yeah, it all varies for me. Joe's much more,
and it literally looks like Dave as well.
Well, in my defence, I didn't give that remit to the guy who drew it, Mark. I gave him a picture of one of the Rent-A-Ghost people, which is like a huge show in the UK.
Yes.
I said I'd like him to look like that, and then Joe said, "You do realise you look like that?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So it's semi-autobiographical, I suppose, in that aspect. But yeah, it all depends. Like I say, I was saying to Vicky that I work outdoors, so for hours on end, I'm on my own. And I tend to sort of like have lots and lots of ideas. So every 2 or 3 minutes, I'll stop and I'll get my phone out and I'll send a Facebook message to myself. So it's the only way I can store stuff and look at it later. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, I'll look at it and think, wow, what the hell was that I was talking about? I've no idea what story it was. Yeah, so I've got about 300 different stories written down. Most of them I've no idea what they're going to be. But yeah,
okay,
that's the fun part for me.
So I brought up stories. Now let's switch to artists, and I'm going to put you on the spot. Which artists do you like working with the best? And I know it's not good to pick favorites. You ostracize others, but which ones do you like working with the best?
Mark, you're going to cause so much trouble with
I
this
am.
question.
This is a hot topic. This is a hard-hitting show, MarkWHO42. We ask the hard questions here.
They're never going to talk to us again, Mark.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll let Joe go first for this one.
Well, I can honestly say that each artist has their own qualities, has their own sort of personalities, and my interaction with them is much different. So I very rarely talk to Rupert, barring he might have a few questions about script. Andy Sawyers, he's like a brother from another mother. He's such a lovely guy. And obviously we worked together on El Benito, the sort of madcap rabbit story.
Yeah, that's a great story.
And Mark Maron is, oh God, that was such a privilege to work with him. And I'd say it's a privilege to work with the three of them, because I've only worked with, Ian Stopforth as well. So there's 4 people that I've had the privilege to work with. And I can't.
So you're basically saying all of them you worked with. You're not picking a favorite. You're doing the proper answer. You're doing the proper answer that won't get you in trouble. I see, Joe. Okay, gotcha.
But that's the God's honest truth. They're all brilliant people.
That's good. That's excellent. Dave, I'm putting you on the spot now.
Andy Sawyers. Andy Sawyers.
Okay.
But there is reasons, right? Okay. If I want an easy life, Lee Milmore working on a Blaze strip was just wonderful, because I literally wrote the script, gave him loads of photo reference stuff, because it's took off very much of a Hammer style horror movie. It's quite easy to give him photo references, so I literally gave it him, and he brought it back, and it was exactly how I imagined it on the page. That was brilliant. That was wonderful. But in terms of madness, it's just Andy Sawyers, because he's crazy. I'll write. We've got to the point now. We work so closely together on Silver Jubilee. I don't even write a script at the start. We'll have a phone call and we'll go through a loose synopsis, and it's a bit like actually how Stanley and Kirby worked, because we'll talk it through and I'll say exactly what I want on which page, and then he just goes away and draws it and then comes back, and then he'll say, "I'd like this kind of dialogue here, if that's okay," and I'll go, yeah, no problems. Then I'll write the script around that, because his artwork's so out there. It's I mean, he, as he calls it himself, he does it with psycho vision. So he can't control, and he's a force of nature. He's one of my best friends as well. I mean, I've worked with Hal Larin into line work, and the computer work he does, the graphics is just unbelievable. Sinclair Elliott was a wonderful artist, but in terms of madness, it's Andy, because he just doesn't disappoint. He just brings out something, and probably only 50% of what I imagined would be in there is actually in there by the time Andy finishes it. But I can guarantee that the 50% that he's put in that's totally new is incredible.
Yeah,
and so
Yeah.
as it stands at the moment, Mark Maron's done a brilliant job on Bones of Winter. He once again followed the script perfectly. But yeah, Andy's just such a good mate. I couldn't not say that. Plus, he'll listen to this and he'll beat me up if I say.
Well, yeah. Hey, we'll have to have you on the show to talk about Dave now.
Yeah, he won't say the same. He's worked with a lot of writers.
All right.
We get on great.
Yeah, that's great. What is the fascination with independent comics, like the 77?
I would like to think the fascination is that we're doing something that's not being done in the mainstream or can't be done in the mainstream.
Right.
I think 2000 AD, if you pick it up nowadays, you can flick through it and it looks wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And the writing is very competent and at times incredible.
Right.
But it just feels incredibly safe. And I don't know whether that's
I see that.
I don't know whether that's because when you're working with such high budgets and there's a lot more at stake when you're dealing with dozens of people's careers, if it goes wrong, you might tend to sort of play a more middle of the road attitude. That doesn't mean there's not room for it in 2000 AD for it to be extravagant and wild and so on. Obviously, at times it is. But I think in independent comics, you tend to, it's a lot more throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, as opposed to, well, this has worked for 20 years, so we're going to carry on with that. And as well as that, like, I mean, in terms of budget as well, if the 77 goes under tomorrow, no one's going to be out of a job because we all work in real life.
Right.
You know, so we haven't got our houses on the our houses aren't on the line. If Rebellion Publishing was to go bust, which it won't, you look at people, being in a lot of trouble. So I think you're able to be a bit wilder in the independent market. And also, as well, you get a lot of new voices. I mean, there's so many people who've never worked in comics or been out of comics for 20 years working on the 77 publication, and others such as Brawler and Time Bomb Comics and The Shift and so on and so forth. I think they're getting a voice now that they've never been able to get before. And I think that's, for me, that's good. Whereas like with your big budget comics, and that goes for Marvel and DC as well, it tends to be pretty much a similar stable of people. Certainly with 2000 AD, you've got a recurring cast of.
It's hard to break in. It's hard to get your voice heard when there's something to be said about going gonzo and just doing things where you don't have the machine, because as much as I may love Marvel and DC and all these other comics that have grown up in my lifetime, they are a machine now. They're a profit-making machine, and they are very risk adverse. And that means it's hard for you to be a new voice, whether you're a writer or an artist or anything else in any of the realms. And you see it in films, you see it in books, you see it in comics. It's hard to get that first step in. And I think if we didn't have independent comic books and independent everything, we wouldn't get these new voices. We wouldn't have gotten all these amazing, we wouldn't have gotten the 77 quality and newness and freshness, Pandora, all of that. In a typical setting, there'd be a committee, there'd be focus groups, there'd be, a new committee formed when the last committee didn't come up with a good idea, and and hire a couple of consultants and pay a few $1 million, and then it doesn't happen. Whereas with you guys doing this by the seat of your pants, with it coming from a place of a love of what you do, I think that's why it gives us such a fresh perspective and such a beautiful product.
I think one of the most proud moments for Pandora for me was being able to leave the door open for Lola, and that's Lola Bonato, who illustrated If You Just Listen, and it was such a I use privilege a lot, and I've said this in other interviews as well, but it was a privilege to find out that she actually used her work and the comic as part of her final work for her degree.
Wow.
She was still studying comic art conception at university. So it was, I felt I wouldn't say I felt like it was something that was placed on me. It was coming from inside me, that somebody gave me the opportunity, the chance to write a story, to then go and put a comic anthology together, that I really, really strongly feel like we have to leave the door open for others.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's I think the fascination for independent comics is something similar, that we are actually inspiring people to go out there and do their own as well. You know, there's no just, if you've got an idea or a story, you cannot wait for somebody to pick it up. Sometimes, I believe, sometimes you have to do that step yourself. You have to find out about self-publishing, because like you say, like Vicky's just mentioned, so many of these big companies are so risk adverse that they cannot actually open the door to everybody. Whereas if you truly believe in the product, if you truly believe in your story, then I would certainly say go ahead and self-publish.
Cool.
Well, I think going back to what Jo said as well, with bringing forward Lola and so on, I also think it's fascinating that we've got both extremes with the 77 Publications, because we've had Pete Weston come into the 77 Publications, who's nearly 70 and never been published in comics before.
Wow.
Oh.
Now this is a guy who worked on Who Framed Roger Rabbit as an animator.
Right.
Has won a BAFTA. You know, worked on The Snowman and the Snow Dog. He's done such an amazing body of work, let alone the fact that his dad was one of the greatest British comic artists of all time. So he's got all that going on to Mark Weston.
And he still didn't get in until now.
He just waited till he retired and then thought, well, I can do this. And then produced Pandora's Ring, Dominica's Ring for Blaze issue 1. And we've got a strip, myself and Pete have got a strip coming in Pandora 2, The Devil's Bride, which is going to be a gritty spaghetti western, basically.
I cannot wait for
and
it.
A tale of revenge, basically, about a girl who's out to get kill her father, basically.
Are we ever going to find out what happened to that ring?
Yes, I believe so. It's definitely in Blazer 3. So because I was really, Blazer 2. Where is it? Where is it? No, Pete,
it was a cliffhanger.
Pete unfortunately had quite a nasty accident. He damaged the nerve in his wrist, which just happened to his writing wrist, and took it. Well, he did think at the time that he wouldn't be able to go back to comics because it was that damaged. But he's back better than ever now, and like I say, he's finished, as far as I'm aware, the story for Blazer 3, so that's back 100%. And he's working on Devil's Bride for Pandora 2. And that was another one with titles. I never realised that The Devil Rides Out was called The Devil's Bride in America. We'd even done the title. And then someone says, I think it might have been Jo.
It was me.
That was the US release of The Devil Rides Out. And I was like, oh no, that's one of my favourite films. I should have known that. So it all goes in somewhere and gets stored somewhere in your head, I think, and then just pops out.
Off topic, Dave. I know you're a 2000 AD reader, because 1977, 2000 AD. What I've wanted to ask somebody, and you're in the business, you with 77, you're in the business. And I only know people's opinions who are writing into the 2000 AD, but I want to get yours. What is your opinion on the regened issues?
I think.
Let me explain what they are first, folks. Regened issues are they interrupt the storylines 4 times a year to put stories for younger readers, and I think I'm not sure why, to get people to start reading comics or something.
I would imagine so. Yeah. I would imagine so. I think the regened issues cause a lot of problems with a lot of the older fans. However. The story, I don't have an issue with the stories. I don't have an issue with the art. I have an issue, which a lot of people have, is the way that they break up the storylines so they come out 4 times a year.
Right.
Now, I've read the reasoning behind why they do it, and it makes complete financial sense. It's really difficult to have a separate comic put into W.H. Smith's, which is the bit which I talked about earlier. So it's easier for them to, and much more financially viable for them to put them in like that. However, I would much rather see them do it when there's no storylines ongoing, because sometimes it can break up a storyline.
Yes.
And I do feel that they may well be pushing in the future for 2000 AD to be more regened than 2000 AD. Which is well, I mean,
but it is fine, but it isn't, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I like the adult nature of the book. I'm not reading it to read stories for younger readers.
Yeah, for myself, I mean, it's a difficult one because 2000 AD, when it came out when we were kids, it was for younger readers, and it was never an issue. But for younger readers,
it was
then,
for
you could use much more adult themes.
It was for younger readers, but the content got a little,
Yeah,
kind of like
absolutely.
action.
And
The content got a little mature. Yeah.
For myself, if I was Tharg, and I never will, but if I was Tharg, I would love to see the Judge Dredd magazine turned into the Regent. And then if that sold absolute tons, then it would obviously be a case that maybe 2000 AD has to change in that respect.
Right.
Keep the adult content in 2000 AD, and then put the Regent stuff in the Judge Dredd magazine. I'm not, but
however, I love Judge Dredd magazine the way it is. So you're kind of preaching to the wrong person here.
Yeah, I think whatever you do, you're going to upset people. It doesn't bother me. I mean, for me, if it had never appeared, I wouldn't be bothered at all.
Right.
There have been some decent stories in there. I quite like the Cadet
Dredd is good. They did an Anderson story that was good. I like the one that spilled into the main book. I forgot the character's name. It's like a Mary Poppins. What was the name?
Yeah. I know exactly who you're about. Yeah. Once again, I think that's great. But they're all stories that could just go in 2000 AD.
Well, right, and that's why they work for me.
Yeah. It's a difficult one. I'm yet to find anyone who's a rabid fan of it online.
Well, someone must be a rabid fan of it, or it wouldn't be gone 4 times a year. There must be people reading it.
But Tharg consistently says that the Regent issues are the biggest sellers of the year.
Okay.
So, who's to say? I find that hard to believe. But
I want to know where they're getting these numbers from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see it. I don't see it.
I don't either. But it's a difficult one. I like I say, it's not for me. But then a lot of 2000 AD content doesn't really strike a chord with me these days, to be fair. Whereas I think when I was young, you'd read 2000 AD and there'd be 6 stories, and 5 out of the 6 would be great. And you could put up with one being bad.
Yeah.
I tend to find now when I'm reading it, there's 2 that I really like, and maybe 3 that I'm not so bothered about. Whether that's my age, I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest with you. The more and more I find I'm writing, the less I read comics now anyway, because I don't want to be in a position of being influenced that much. I sort of tend to read a lot of independent horror comics still, because that's just what I love.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as like 2000 AD, I'm a huge Marvel fan as well.
Marvel's good. Yeah.
And like X-Men and that.
I don't read X-Men. I don't know. I used to.
Yeah, but I used to, But what I tend to do now, I tend to collect up the omnibuses, the sort of Bronze and Silver Age omnibuses now.
I love the old stuff. The old stuff.
That's what I want to read. It's
Claremont.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing an X-Men read through, because I've got all the collected editions up to about issue 350, 370, something like that. And I'm just on like the X-Men Alpha Flight stuff at the moment.
With DC Comics, I've started rereading the Supermans from John Byrne, 86. I'm in 1991 now.
Nice.
And I'm going to keep on, because I had these as comics when they were coming out, and I read them week by week, and now I've got digital files. So I'm reading
with DC. With DC, I tend to sort of read. It's more the Vertigo stuff I'm into with DC.
Yeah.
But I did have all this. Yeah, I bought everything back then. JLI classic stuff. So yeah, and you tend not to find that much. I mean, as Vicky said earlier, I don't know if it was when you was off. Everything seems to be geared towards sort of movie making and corporate nature. So you tend. It is so safe, and it doesn't do it for me. A lot of the stuff, and maybe that's just they're not making comics for me anymore, and I'll have to accept that.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you so much for having a conversation about Regened with me. You're the first person I've been able to talk to about it. No one I know here reads 2000 AD. I got no one to talk to.
See, that felt a much more difficult conversation than who's my favourite artist. Because I'm thinking, how many people am I upsetting with this? Because it really is loaded, because I see that many arguments online about Regened.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Just wanted to verbally talk about it. Vicky, you wanted to ask a question?
Oh, I lost that question a long time ago, honey. But it did kind of, listening to Dave talk, it made me think about why I kind of stopped reading comic books. I had my collections. Well, what survived? I grew up military, and let me tell you what military movers do to your stuff. They lose it, they destroy it, they soak it in water, they set it on fire. You lose half your items. I lost an entire record LP collection.
Wow.
Due to the last move that I had the military do for me. It was so fun. And I lost a lot of my comics over the years, but I had some. And when my son was growing up, I of course introduced him to him, but I don't know. I kind of felt like in the late 90s and the early 2000s that I now that I think about it, it's just, they were all safe, or they were regurgitating existing storylines with nothing new, or, I just wasn't getting the same thrill I used to get. And to be honest, the first thing that really piqued my interest again was that first issue of the 77 that Mark sent to me. And I was like, oh, this is different. This is fun. This is, and there were pieces that, because I'm a well-rounded nerd where I like lots of different genres. I like old horror, Hammer films, love every single one of them. Probably should not have watched them as much as I did in my childhood, but I did. Without my mother knowing. My mother, good Catholic girl, had no idea what my brother and I were watching.
That's the only way to do it. You can't watch it with
No. And I'm sure they were all wildly edited when they were playing on American TV.
Yeah.
But it just, I feel like something got lost. And I don't know if it was because I was getting older, or if because there was feeling like a been there, done that. It's more of a profit-making machine. I've just not been as thrilled with it as I used to be. My now husband and I used to go to the store called Jellies in Mililani, Hawaii. And it was great. They had comics, they had LPs, they had,
I'm
old,
jelly.
new, Jellies.
No, I'm saying I'm jelly.
Oh.
I'm jealous.
Oh, you're jelly.
I'm jelly.
It was this great store we used to hang out in. And it was just wonderful. And because of course in Hawaii, even though it's part of the United States, it's very international. So we'd get things from all over Asia and Europe,
right.
and that was fun. And then I moved back to the mainland USA, and I feel like I lost all that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to kind of see over the decades how comics have changed and the cycles they've gone through. And we need more like the 77. We need people who are willing to take risks and are willing to do something different and bring these new artists that nobody's ever heard of before, or have been quietly working in a back room for the last 7 decades. We need that. And I think we need that as a society and as a fandom, because sometimes I think they forget about us.
Yeah.
And they're not doing it for me. They're doing it for somebody with more money or something. I don't know.
I think as a kid, one of the amazing things was, 2000 AD was my main comic as a kid growing up, but I got into sort of Marvel and DC more as a teenager. Mm. But I can remember every single storyline from 2000 AD growing up. I can even remember the dialogue. Because you'd get
I can't go that far.
But you'd get a comic and you'd probably read it 5 or 6 times in that week.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get a comic, you'll read it 5 minutes and then put it away. And I think that's sad. And I'd love to think that people are reading the 77 more than once. That's certainly what we want to do with it. We certainly want to. We don't want it to be throwaway. We want it to be something that the reader can grow with as well. And especially as we're creating a universe, as it were, from the ground up. All the stories, you know, you can get absolutely every story that's been in the 77 in 8 issues. You know, so you've not got to get 40 years of sort of like canon, and you've not got to get 3 or 4 different reboots. I mean, one of the things that put me off DC was the amount of times they rebooted DC. I loved Crisis.
Yeah.
But the amount of times they've rebooted it,
Red Skies.
I like my characters to grow with. Yeah, exactly. I like my characters to grow with me. I mean, obviously, we get into the age now where you don't really want sort of like decrepit superheroes anymore.
Right.
But I love the fact that when I was reading Spider-Man as a teenager, he was going through similar things to what I was going through, and I think that's missing from modern comics. I think they're not allowed to do that now. And the massive, I think another thing as well with it in terms of writing and what I find from being a writer, the popularity of such deconstruction, where you go back to Chris Claremont's X-Men, you'd have a huge amount of dialogue. Sometimes it'd be overwhelming, but you'd get that feeling that you'd know what was going on. And the different subplots. And now you could literally buy a comic that might cost $5, say, and it will literally be 2 people sitting around a table having a cup of coffee or something and just talking about the day for half the comic.
Well, I mean, you can have a two-hander every once in a while. They do that on EastEnders. They do that on EastEnders every once in a while.
It seems like it's more and more. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Again, modern comics, not really reading them, so I don't know these things. Speaking of, rebooting and DC rebooting the universe, at least they figured out that New 52 was a mistake, and they changed it back.
Quite quickly as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thank God the real Superman, the real Clark Kent came back. Yeah.
Yeah. That was shocking. I couldn't even read it, to be honest. I was reading the previews and I was like, no, it's too much. It's too much.
No, I agree wholly. Okay, we're starting to run out of time here on the podcast, which is weird because, to be honest, we could go on for 10 hours and keep, but we're not going to keep them.
Yes, but eventually they're going to go, seriously, people, come on.
Yeah. Where can people, This Comic is Haunted, issue 1, Kickstarter ends this Sunday, the 21st, August 21st, 2022, in case you're listening at some other time and you want to go to Kickstarter and it's too late. Where can they go, Dave?
Yeah, basically go on to Kickstarter.com, type in This Comic is Haunted, you'll find it. We're a project I love, so it's quite heavily promoted on there, and you'll see it. And if you want to know what the cover looks like, it's basically a ghostly phantom, and it's got big green slime lettering above it, so you can't miss it.
Well, they'll see it on the cover of this episode. They'll see it on the logo of this episode. They'll see part of it. I didn't show the whole thing. It's cropped purposely, so they have to get the issue to see the whole thing.
And obviously as well, I put a lot of stuff on the actual Facebook group. This Comic is Haunted as well. So for those who do Facebook in these days, you can get us there as well. So yeah, it's just stuff. And as well, for those who don't do Kickstarter, from September the 9th, it will be available to buy from our online store at the77comic.net.
What kind of Facebook and Twitter presences do you have for this, the 77, and other things?
Joe's the one for that.
On Twitter, it's the 77 Comic. We have a dedicated Facebook group for This Comic is Haunted. And we also have our standard The 77 group. We're also on Instagram and at The 77 Comic. Mm-hmm. So you'll be able to see bits and bobs of art on there. And it's like I say, This Comic is Haunted has its own dedicated Facebook group, and there's all sorts going on there. There's also fan art. Mm-hmm. That's cropped up. Certainly there's been some amazing images that have come through of the Grey Phantom. So he's definitely struck a chord with our readers, even though the comic isn't out yet. You know, the fact that people have been creating their own versions of the Grey Phantom has been amazing. And
it's quite scary how many of them look like me as well. That's I really don't have the body for a disembodied ghost, to be fair, but I've tried the hardest.
Put the panda makeup on.
Yeah.
If they're 2000 AD fans, Dave, what Facebook page should they go to?
Yeah, we're at the 1977 to 2000 AD Facebook group. I think we're up to about 15,000 members now, so we're still going strong. And to be honest, there's a lot of great 2000 AD groups out there, but in terms of actual interaction with the creators themselves, I think we've got quite a strong presence.
Yes.
A lot of them really like posting on there as well. You know, you will get John Wagner commenting and Steve McManus and stuff like that. So yeah, it's certainly a place that if you're interested in hearing some secrets from behind the scenes, that's where the place to be.
Yeah, I've actually been a member of that group for quite a long time now. Love it. Any final thoughts, Dave and Jo, for our listeners and for the people who followed the 77? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, a huge thank you to everybody so far who's been sort of sharing our pages. There's quite a buzz on Twitter about this comic is haunted. So for me, it will be a huge thank you to them, and also a huge thank you to you and Vicky for having us on again. Really appreciate it.
You're
and
welcome.
It's always a laugh. I always come away having had a laugh. So yeah.
And you are a good public speaker.
Oh, bless you.
You're very good, darling. Very good.
Dave?
Yeah, once again, I'll echo what Jo said. Just thank you to absolutely everyone to be in a position at our stage in life. We're not decrepit yet, but to be middle-aged and we've been out the scene for so long, and to find yourself being able to have a voice within it again and have people actually enjoy what you do, because at the end of the day, there's no point doing it if people don't enjoy it. And to actually make people's days better when they've actually read a comic that you've wrote. I don't, outside of my family, I don't think there's anything better than that in the world, and it's certainly my proudest achievement. And to hear feedback, like off Vicky, yourself, and Mark, it's just wonderful. And don't think that we sort of take it for granted, because we don't. It is really, really means a lot. And when the directors get together every Wednesday to have a chat, we just, most of the time, we're like, have you heard what this person said? We can't believe it. Because we're comics fans as well. And, the idea that people enjoy our product is just wonderful. And while people keep buying it, and frankly, even if they're not buying it, we'll still keep producing it. There's plenty of stories to come, and I've got another 15 years of work left, so I've got plenty of time to wander around and keep thinking thoughts. And I'm sure Jo's the same, so she'll still keep producing stuff as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to thank you for stopping by, Jo and Dave Heeley. Want to let you guys know you're welcome back whenever you want to publicize. Let Banksy know he can come back on. We've had you guys on 3 or 4 times already. You can keep coming back. We love having you here. We love the comics. We want to promote the heck out of you.
Yes.
Brilliant. No, thank you so much. I'd imagine he'll be in touch soon regarding Blazer 3, because like I say, that's coming thick and fast when this finishes. So it's no time to draw a breath for us.
We'll definitely do that. Vicky, wow, we had another good show, didn't we?
We had a fabulous show. I've had so much fun. And thank you guys for creating a comic that I can enjoy again.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot rave enough about this. Not only is it part of my childhood, but it's also forward thinking, and it just keep up the good work.
Definitely.
Thank you, and I hope the horror comic sort of fulfills your Hammer horror needs, because it's certainly where I've come from with it anyway. So,
and you know what, we're looking for issue 2 in the future. Definitely.
Yes.
It's got to happen. It's got to happen.
Well, I'm fully paginated up to issue 5 with strips.
Oh, really?
And a lot of
nice. I'm buying them all. I'm buying them all.
And and I've certainly got scope for like at least 9 issues just off the top of my head. It's ridiculous. It really has struck a chord with people. I didn't realise just how much horror is a big part of people's lives, and it is quite incredible when even people that can't be involved in it because they're too busy doing other stuff have got in touch and said, wow, I'm really glad you're doing, like, you know, these creators, I'm really glad you're doing this because, you know, it needs to be out there. So yeah, it's great stuff. And so it's every 6 months. You've got me for a few years at least, definitely.
And 6 months, that means, Jo, we can't wait for Pandora.
It's
More
coming.
Pandora.
So towards the end of the year, early Jan.
Yay.
Oh, I'm so excited.
That will be coming back. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yay!
Okay, so you've been listening to the MarkWHO42's Universe podcast. As we add the and podcast to this version. If you want to listen to our show, we're on Subspace Radio Network 5 times a week. You can listen to us there, or for the expanded version, listen to this podcast. We're located on MarkWHO42.com, Geekcast Radio Network, Florida Geek Scene. We're on Audible, we're on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, everywhere around the interweb thingy. Until next time, thanks Jo Heeley, thanks Dave Heeley, thank you Vicky Jakubowski. We will be back with an all-new show next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to MarkWHO42's Universe with hosts Mark Baumgarten, Eduardo M. Fryer, Zion Quiros, and Vicky Jakubowski. This program was produced and directed by Mark Baumgarten. If you'd like to get in touch with us, please go to our Facebook page or email us at markwho42s.universe@gmail.com. You can listen to old shows at our website, markwho42.com, or even our YouTube page, MarkWHO42. MarkWHO42's Universe, copyright 2022.